Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 members present, the House is now in session. The clerk will read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, April 25th, 2021.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of journal from the previous day.
So ordered. Petitions, memorials, and other papers. Message from the Senate, House Bill 1047. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1047, Mail-in Voting Enhancement Act.
The clerk will read the message from the Senate.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate does not recede in the Senate amendments. The Senate respectfully requests the House reconsider and concur. Said bill is returned herewith. Introductory bills.
Do I need the papers? Message from the Senate. Senate bills introduced in the House. The clerk will read the bills and committee assignments.
Senate Bill 57, Senator Lee, House Rules. Senate Bill 224, Senator West, House Rules. By order, Sylvia Seeger, Chief Clerk.
No. Do nothing. Senate Bill 71, message from the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Senate Bill 71, Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, body-worn cameras, employee programs, and use of force.
Hearing no objections, the message is ordered. Journal launch.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 71. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered. Journalized. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 71, Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, body-worn cameras, employee programs, and use of force.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive?
Madam Speaker.
Recognize any minority leader.
Madam Speaker, we've had great debate on this bill, and I rise to support the governor's veto. While we all support body-worn cameras and want to see it used to the fullest extent possible, this bill moves away from currently well-established through the Supreme Court decision related to use of force. There's clear standards as to what is appropriate and inappropriate. And as this bill is drafted, it goes too far, and it will subject law enforcement officers around the state who have to make a decision in a split second as to whether their lives are in jeopardy, the individual that they're trying to deal with's lives are in jeopardy, or some citizen or witness's lives are in jeopardy. You know, we need to do everything that we can to support law enforcement to do their jobs appropriately and properly to protect our communities. But I have to say that this bill goes too far, and the consequences of a bill like this, in my opinion, will force law enforcement officers to step back and stand down in situations that a reasonable person would want them to act. So while I do support police reform, I think that the bill before us just simply goes too far and puts the lives of innocent citizens, law enforcement, and others at risk. I urge the body to support the governor's veto.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I urge you to override the governor's veto. Listen, while this debate was unfolding, we had a terrible incident happen in Tacoma Park, my home district. We had an off-duty Pentagon police officer decide to take it upon themselves when they encountered what they thought was two gentlemen robbing a vehicle to pull out a firearm, shoot, and kill both of them as they were fleeing. And upon looking at the video footage of that incident, the people were well beyond the officer. They were leaving him. They were shot in the back. Both were killed. Guess what color they were? They were black. And so this is happening as we debate use of force. This was in my district, in Maryland, literally as these vetoes were being contemplated. So you cannot tell me that we don't need this legislation. Literally as we were debating this happened. It's unacceptable. This culture of violence, this taking life for granted. This officer was off duty. This was not his jurisdiction. He took it upon himself to be judge, jury, and executioner. It's unacceptable. Please override the veto. This was a well thought out standard for use of force in Maryland. We're going to retrain our officers to only use force that is necessary and proportional. We need to stop these incidents. It's a reboot, it's a refresh, and it's a reimagining of policing. Please override Governor Hogan's veto. We need this legislation, and we need it now.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the passion of my friend from Montgomery County. But there's a lot of other stories to be told. And let's start telling some of them. Let's start telling the stories of what happens in the real world with police who in split seconds, no one in this room could do what they have to do. That's not our jobs. We sit here and think for hours, for days, for months about every little thing we do, hitting a button, red, green, who wins, who loses. They have split seconds, their lives. Maybe your life, maybe your kid's life, the life of an innocent person, their lives, I don't know. I don't know if this guy's okay and he's just having a bad day. Maybe when his hand's behind his back, maybe when he's coming at me, he's okay. He's not going to hurt me. I can talk him down. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe he's got a knife. Maybe he's got a gun. Maybe no matter what I do, he's going to try to kill, hurt me, or the people next to me. So I want to we talk about stories. So in Arnold, Maryland, I'm not an expert in Anne Arundel County by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding is Arnold, Maryland's real close to here, real close. Use of force statute, March 28th, a couple weeks ago. A man in a residential neighborhood who is out on release from charges earlier this year of assault and resisting arrest. A residential neighborhood, a woman and her 20-year-old son, they pull the car out of their driveway, they're driving down the road in the residential neighborhood. He stands in front of their car, jumps onto their car. The 20-year-old son, to protect his mother, gets out of the car, walks around the other side to confront the individual. What does he do? He stabs him with a 6-inch knife. Kid's laying on the ground in a pool of blood. His father, inside the house, not very far away, hears the screaming and the noise. His father runs out. Get away from my son, get away from my son. What does the individual do? Who's out on pre-release for assault and resisting arrest. What does he do? He stabs him again with a 6-inch knife. Life-threatening injuries. Father goes and he gets a legally owned handgun in Arnold, not a very far distance from here. When he comes out with the legally owned handgun, the suspect runs. And who does he run into? He runs into the police. What do the police do? Well, they do everything. They have to pull guns on him. They try to talk him down. They try to corner him. They try to corner him. He will not drop the knife. They know what he's done. They know that he's dangerous. They shoot him with a stun gun, a taser-like device. You know what he does? He pulls the prongs of the taser out of his body and throws him on the ground and keeps moving. So finally, an alert officer has an SUV that she's pulled up into a lane. You can see it. It's on the news. Some of you may have seen and heard this story. It's not very long ago. She pulls up in the lane behind him, and she notices that because he's distracted because the other officer's advancing and trying to contain his progress, she actually hits him with the car, lightly. She doesn't run him over. It's not like what happened to Officer Amy Caprio. She did it lightly and intelligently. She knocks him to the ground so that the other officers can rush forward and try to restrain him. And they shoot him with the stun gun again because he is still resisting arrest and still trying to injure them. You know what the media stories talked about the most? Officer strikes suspect with car. I'd hate to be that officer today. I'd hate to be that officer's family and thinking, am I going to get in trouble because I thought I was saving the lives maybe of my colleagues by doing something right? And we'll come here in this room where none of those things happen. We never have to make those kind of decisions. And we'll play Monday morning quarterback. That's what the use of force statute is going to do. We could talk about Martinez Mitchum. We could talk about Kevin Valencia. We could talk about Eric Talley. These are 3 police officers who've been killed in the line of duty in the last 10 days, 12 days. African American, one of them. Hispanic American, one of them. The other one rushed in with the active shooter in Boulder, Colorado that killed 10 people and put his life on the line. He wasn't worried about, I got to run through this checklist. What do I do with this man that may be crazy, that may be evil, that is certainly violent? What do I do? Well, let me run through a checklist. Is this necessary? Is it necessary if I grab his arm? Is it proportionate if he only has a knife, if I use my gun? What is it? I got to run through the checklist. Guess who's not running through a checklist? The criminal. Criminal's not running through a checklist saying, well, what am I doing with these police officers? They don't do it. I'm going to leave you with one last story because I think it's important we remember all of these people in all of these situations and not just the ones that fit our narrative. About 5 years ago, there were 2 Harford County Sheriff's deputies who were killed. They were killed. Someone alerted them to a man was in a restaurant, a diner, that they knew that this individual was wanted in connection with a possible attempted murder. And the first officer showed up at the diner, and he didn't come in, guns blazing, throw the guy on the ground, shoot him up. He came in and he sat down and he tried to talk to the individual. Hey, I want to talk to you. I'm an officer, Harford County Sheriff's Department. I want to talk to you. The man pulled a gun out of his pocket, and he killed Patrick Daly in seconds. Shot him in the head. The next group of officers arrived, and this is why the story resonated to me, was a man named Mark Logston. And Mark Logston grew up in Allegheny County, Maryland, in a little town called Mount Savage. It's in my district. I grew up about 5 miles from there. And I remembered Mark because Mark, like me, like everyone, where I grew up and when I grew up, we played ball. Baseball, basketball, football, didn't matter. That's what we grew up to do. That was our dream, was to play ball. Mark played ball. He was a good ball player. I hadn't seen or talked or thought of Mark or his family in years. Mark left Allegheny County. He went in the Army. He never came back, to the best of my knowledge. What I found out he did is he became a Harford County Sheriff's deputy. And how I found that out is because I was sitting here on the floor of the House of Delegates when we commemorated his loss. And they said, Officer Mark Logston. And I thought, man, I kind of remember that name from when I was a kid. And I found out that it was him. Mark rushed to that scene where that individual shot and killed his colleague with no advance warning, with no worry about the transgression. Pat Daly wasn't there abusing any of his police powers. He was there trying to talk the guy down, do it reasonable, do it necessary. He got shot in the head. And Mark approached, and Mark and other officers attempted to restrain this individual to prevent him from leaving. And Mark got shot. And Mark had a wife and 3 children. And they'll never see him again. And the first time I heard his name in 20 years sitting on this floor of the House of Delegates. There's no easy answers. There's no perfect answer. But we've got to stop looking at the criminals as the potential criminals, as always the victims. And the actual victims, well, let's ignore them. And the police officers, let's look for additional ways to criminalize them. And that's what part of this bill does. A lot of this bill I'm 100% in support of, and I was when I served on the work group. Body-worn cameras, employee health programs, some great ideas. But when you start talking about we're going to create a new and specific use of force paradigm, and then we're going to attach a criminal penalty to it just for police officers. We've got a new criminal penalty. You violate this use of force statute, you go to jail. It's not fair to them. It's not right at all. But I think it's important we remember everybody and everybody's position and perspective in this debate. I'll support the governor's veto for that reason and that reason alone. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, please, I urge you to override this veto. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I just want to leave you with one final anecdote about this. You heard about the one I just mentioned. Terrible story. Happened to Tacoma Park, and we have 2 people dead. And no property should be more important than somebody's life, let alone 2 lives. You might remember, you might have laughed at my expense. I was the victim of a property crime not too long ago. My vehicle was stolen in Tacoma Park. You know who the perpetrators were? They were also 2 black residents. Do you know how old they were? They were 13 years old. What if this officer had shot 2 13-year-olds? We cannot have this happening. The officers must be retrained. They must only use force that is necessary, not deadly force to retrieve property. I would not be able to live with myself if 2 13-year-old kids from my neighborhood were killed because of my car, my crappy car. I really wouldn't be able to live with myself. I paid a $200 insurance deductible. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. I hope for the best for those 2 kids, but their lives are not worth it. That's what this bill is about. Please vote to override this veto.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This has been one of the most challenging processes of my entire life working through this legislation. First, I want to thank the Speaker's staff, the committee chair and vice chair, and the members of the committee and the subcommittee, because I do feel like I had a voice in the process. It got tense at times. It was hard sometimes with some of the rhetoric, not to take things personally as being former law enforcement. It was a challenge because I know this bill is good intentioned, and I agree with everything that the floor leader just said. We got to avoid these situations. And I think the body-worn camera provision in this, although I wish there was a funding mechanism in it, is going to do a lot of good for a lot of people. It's going to do good for citizens. It's also going to do good for law enforcement. And I think it's overdue and necessary, and I'm excited we're getting this done in this bill. But the use of force standard, I've honestly, this is not just some speech rhetoric, lost sleep over it. Woke up in the middle of the night thinking about different scenarios and how to navigate it in situations that I've been in and others have been in. I think right back to another situation, and I'm not trying to one-up or compete because we all have our different experiences that have led us here to our views on this. So I'm not trying to compete my experience or another experience with anybody's. A week ago, when a DC Capitol police officer was killed by a vehicle smashing into them. And I go through my head, based upon this use of force continuum, at what point legally could that police officer determine that vehicle is a threat? At 500 yards, at 300 yards, at 100 yards, or right before the point of impact? And as we can certainly go back and Monday morning quarterback it, right? And say, oh, well, clearly it was a threat because that vehicle killed that police officer. But in the moment, as I'm thinking about the consequences, and I'm thinking about, okay, this car's 100 yards from me, not slowing down. If I pull my gun and he's about to stop, I violated the use of force standard. Therefore, I'm going to jail. I might lose my pension. My family might lose their pension. And everything I've worked for my entire life in good faith is gone in a moment. Because I could not anticipate at 100 yards, at a car going 40 miles an hour, if that car is just not slowing down yet, or if that car is looking to take my life, which is what happened in this situation. And that is the confusion and the complexity of this use of force standard. And we can run through tons of scenarios. Here's another really real scenario that I really struggle with. And I think this is one of the things we're trying to fix in this bill. But I really struggle with this. Say there's an individual 10 yards from me. They have their hand behind their back and they're threatening me. Right? We've had incidents where kids or young people have been murdered, been killed by cops, right? Because they had a candy bar behind their back. But if you're 10 yards from me and you're threatening me, and potentially you are the individual that's going to keep me from getting home to see my kids tonight, because I cannot positively identify that's a weapon behind your back, I can't pull my weapon. You have your hand behind your back, and you're threatening me. If I pull my gun in self-defense under the continuum of force, that is presentation of deadly force. I have now escalated the deadly force. And if you pull behind my back, and it's a candy bar, I have violated the use of force continuum. And now I'm subject to prosecution. Now, if I'm doing that calculation in my head, sizing up this individual, and following the use of force continuum as outlined in this bill, and I have my hand on my weapon, and you pull out a weapon, by the time I'm even pulling my weapon out of my holster, I am dead. I am dead because I cannot even present deadly force as a deterrent because you're threatening me with a hand behind your back. And listen, go through the worst case scenario in that. The worst case scenario in that situation is a 15-year-old kid with a candy bar behind his back, angry for whatever reason, threatening me, and I pull my gun, and he pulls his arm around, and I shoot him, and he dies because of a candy bar. I couldn't, for the love of God, I couldn't even imagine being in that situation. But I also couldn't imagine being in a situation where trying to do the right thing, trying my very best to be a good police officer, to be a good citizen, to be a good steward of the public trust. And because I'm afraid of losing everything, I lose everything. Because I don't know if that individual in front of me is about to kill me or not. And because under this law, I cannot pull my weapon, and no one can pull their weapon in time. So this will contribute to the loss of life of police officers. There's no amount of training that's going to allow me, to figure out what's behind an individual's back. There's no amount of training that's going to allow me to figure out if this person's going to stop. And in a situation in D.C., no amount of training allowed that individual to know that car wasn't going to stop. That's what this use of force standard does. The use of force standard is a tool to work up and appropriately escalate the use of force based upon what we witness and what we see. This has proportional force, which is certainly vague, and it's extremely difficult to navigate, to understand, and to work up. This use of force continuum is designed to work downward onto a police officer, to have them, as it was said, more easily, to make it more easy to prosecute them, not more easy for them to protect human life and to hold the public trust and do their very, again, I know what we're trying to do here, and I agree. We need to instill trust in policing. We need to build those relationships back up, and I'm with you. This will cost lives. This is going to do the opposite of what's intended. I wish we could have took a little more time and just did a little more on this to make it more functional. I'm grateful for the work we did. I'm grateful for the intentions. But I will be voting to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you.
Gentleman from Charles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Listen to my colleagues speak, and I appreciate everybody's input today. As I read the bill, it says that, under the totality of circumstances, the force is necessary and proportional. Now, in some of the scenarios, there is no standard that we can set that's going to stop a moving car and know when you're going to engage with the moving car. If an individual is coming to threaten you and they have their hand behind their back and you don't know what's behind their back, the totality of circumstances there would show that it would be necessary to pull your weapon to ensure that you're not going to be killed. Here's the thing. It doesn't mean that they're not going to investigate. It doesn't mean they're not going to look further. Of course, because you pulled your gun. If you and I are in an argument right now and I pull my gun, I pray to God they investigate me, even if I'm just scared of you because of your prior Marine training. Sorry. It's very important to realize that we want these officers trained. And yes, we're changing. We're moving the goalposts, if you might say. But the escalation of force, it's not a checklist that they go through. It's a matter of training. When, where, and how they're going to perceive a danger. Because as I've said before, I hate the fact that I'm a danger every time I get pulled over. Due to my size, my color, my tattoos, that I'm a danger. What's even more terrifying is when I see these people that aren't trained, their weapons are out and their hand is shaking because of that lack of training that this bill is going to instill. They're terrified of me for absolutely no reason. God forbid they do a record check and they see my military background. I want to make it out alive too. We give these individuals an inordinate amount of power. With great power comes great responsibility. What we want to do is make sure that everybody who wields a gun and a badge is keeping us safe. It's not jumping to conclusions. It's not saying because, well, it's this time of night and he looks like that, then he must be a deadly threat to me. That is not fair to the people that we serve. And again, with everything we've talked about, this is a training technique. This isn't just going to end with us writing regulations so they can go, all right, well, this is what you have to do now. No, they have to be trained and retrained consistently to when they know, hey, if somebody's yelling at me, maybe I shouldn't point a gun at their face. That sounds preposterous, but that happens all the time. And the excuse is what? Well, I didn't know what he was going to do next. Yeah, but you should be able to pay attention. You keep your head on a swivel. You look at all the surrounding environments, and then you, at that point, decide whether you need to begin the use of lethal force. What we have right now is almost a wild, wild west in some jurisdictions. Officers, all they have to do is articulate, I feared for my life, ... Then whatever happens next becomes legal. That is unacceptable in this country. That is unacceptable in this state. It's unacceptable to treat people this way. What we're trying to do is get it back to the fact that when you have your gun, your hand on your gun, that you still remember that you're looking at another human being. That sounds silly to some of y'all, but I've been on the other side of that. And when you look at that officer's eyes, he's not looking at me like I'm a human being. At best, I'm a threat. At worst, I'm an animal. That is unacceptable. We're trying to retrain our officers. I don't want to get rid of them. I don't want to defund anything. I don't really want to reimagine. but they have to be retrained. They have to be retrained to know that, yes, you should be able to use your weapon not out of fear, but out of skill and training. Because right now we have a lot of untrained officers and a lot of scared individuals. There's nothing more terrified than an individual who's terrified and scared and has a gun. Please support overriding this veto.
A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Clerk will call the roll. There being 94 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 71. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Senate Bill 494, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Senate Bill 494, juveniles convicted as adults, sentencing limitations and reduction. Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 494. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message.
Limitations and reduction.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive?
Madam
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the governor's veto. Obviously, many of us have argued against this bill. I want to point out a couple things before you today to remind you why we believe that this bill goes too far. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that Governor Hogan has been a firm believer and advocate for second chances. And like I think most people in this chamber believe that juveniles are capable of rehabilitation. The other day when I met with Governor Hogan, I asked him about this bill, or this process really. I said, what's it been like for you? And he told me that while he's been very proud to be able to give parole to more people than any other governor in recent history, you know, he's granted 7 paroles, 2 medical paroles, and 4 commutations for this particular population that this bill addresses. He also told me that he's very concerned about this for this reason. While he's been very liberal, unlike other governors in recent history on this issue, he told me that in many of the instances that he's received from the commission advice to grant parole, in many of those instances he didn't grant it because psychiatrists said the individual was still a risk. And officials at the prison where the individual was incarcerated also argued against it despite the Parole Commission advice to grant the parole. You know, I believe in second chances, and I believe in forgiveness, and I have in my life been the recipient of both, and I tried my best to give both. And I know that when you're young, you know, we make mistakes. Kids can make really bad, unthinkable mistakes. But I also know that there are some things that people do that are so horrible, so despicable, that they have to be met with both harsh consequences and, for the interests of public safety and the victims, sentences must be honored to protect all the rest of us. I want to make it incredibly clear that the crimes committed by some of the individuals that this bill could potentially let out of jail are scary. When we were debating this bill last week, the gentleman from Allegheny County talked about Nick Browning, who murdered his father, mother, 2 younger brothers in a cold and calculated manner. The minority whip talked about Daunta Harris, who murdered Officer Amy Capriol, brutally running her over with an SUV. Unfortunately, these are just a few examples. And while it's not my style, I want to tell you about another case that's approximately 20 years old that the bill before us could potentially impact. Benjamin Harris, who's currently 35, was convicted of first-degree murder committed at the age of 16. In 1995, he murdered Sharon Edwards, a 28-year-old mother, whom he slashed and stabbed 26 times. Sharon Harris was the care provider in a cottage where Garris was residing on the property of Shepard Pratt. He tried unsuccessfully to set the cottage on fire, which would have endangered the lives of the other individuals residing at the cottage. Garrett confessed to the murder, telling police officers that Mrs. Edwards pled for her life. This bill before us could impact individuals like him. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 50 years. So some of these people are troubling, and while statistics show that, I believe it was said 1% go on to commit new crimes, there is a process in place currently that seems to be working to address the issues that the bill seems to want to address. However, I confess, this bill before us could have been a little different. And if it was a little different, it would have received more support. It's been said that other states have passed things like this. States that don't have the political makeup of Maryland have passed bills like this. But I believe it was done in a more sensitive way for victims, especially. And when crimes are so heinous, like a crime that involves rape and murder, they're excluded from the bills that have passed in other places. So as it relates to victims, which is one of the cruelest aspects of the bill that's before us, proponents of this bill, who I respect, especially the ones in this chamber, they talk about second chances. The problem is this legislation gives offenders 4 or more chances within 26 years. Which, with each parole hearing and judicial review, victims endure severe re-traumatization. So I think it just goes too far. It causes panic attacks, flashbacks, nightmares, reliving the brutal murders of their loved ones. You may have received a correspondence from a lady named Debbie Kemple. She wrote after the passage of this bill in an appeal to the governor to veto it. Debbie is a resident of Elkridge. She said, "My mother was murdered by a 16-year-old student she was tutoring in 1992 in Howard County. He methodically beat her up, raped and strangled her, dumped her body behind a high store in King's Contrivance, and left her there to die, while he stole her car for a joyride for some fast food and went and played basketball with his friends. He was sentenced to life without parole by a jury that convicted him of her horrendous and merciless murder. He has exercised his right to many appeals throughout the years, and all that has done has ended up with his sentence being upheld. But this legislation will mandate 3 more judicial reviews and parole eligibility, and 400 other dangerous and non-redeemable juvenile killers will receive that as well. Victims and families and friends will be re-victimized, etc., etc. Point out one final thing. In the governor's veto letter, there's a whole stack of state's attorneys' letters saying that this isn't the right way to go. And I want to read one of those very briefly to you now, the one from Montgomery County. The state's attorney in Montgomery County says, "While I support certain aspects of what's trying to be done here, he seeks a veto because I believe the structure of the bill that allows for 3 hearings over a number of years is unduly cruel to the victim or surviving family members." So we didn't have to do it this way. we could have done it in a way that was a little bit more sympathetic to the victims of these heinous crimes. It's cruel to the surviving family members, and it needs to be known that reconsiderations are fraught with tension, pain, and heartache. Clearly, the juvenile is entitled to a look back using the factors outlined by the drafters of this legislation. However, there must remain a balance between offenders and victims' rights. So finally, I just say, by giving it an excessive number of second chances, the legislation forces victims to repeatedly relive violent crimes that destroyed their lives. The freedom of violent offenders is placed above the rights and consideration of the victims. And that is not fair, and that is not right. And this bill before us should have been vetoed, and I urge the body to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to try to go a little further this time because last time I knocked this thing over. I thank the minority leader for his comments, and I think he brought up some very, very valid points. We have heard a number of very heinous crimes and terrible things that's happened to people, and my heart bleeds for them. I've had folks reach out to me. I've had folks in my family murdered. So I didn't come to this issue very lightly. What I'll say is, first, there is no guarantees in this bill of anyone being released. That's the first form. We are creating a process that I believe is measured. And yes, it is repeated in other states. There are differences between our bill and other states, I should mention too. You know, and I give him his credit, our chair of the judiciary was very, very passionate about making sure that victims could participate should they want to make sure that we got this right. Getting the language right for state's attorneys to be able to advocate for how the victims want them to act, whether that is for release or for them staying. All the bill actually says is that if you were a minor when you committed a terrible act, after serving 20 years, which is more than you were alive at the time, you can petition the court. But there's no guarantee of you getting out. We actually added some other stuff too, which is, because I think was hinted in the minority leader's comments on how you can be evaluated. Beyond just general behavioral stuff, we made sure that the judge could review some of potential mental challenges that the folks could have. We've seen that people who do a lot of horrendous acts, particularly when they're young, come from very dangerous communities and have underlying challenges, mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges. I thank this body for working on the JRI years ago on that. There's been commentary from this body about making sure we address the root causes of this. We passed a blueprint that I think helps do that, to be honest. And just, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before that, there's another bill that Delegate Bagnall had. Sorry, my apologies, the delegate from Anne Arundel County. That was making sure that young people get the mental health treatment that they need before they end up doing something that they shouldn't do. So I asked the body to override the governor's veto because the brain science shows that children are still developing and they do terrible acts. But they shouldn't necessarily die in prison if they have the capacity for change. This isn't something that adults have the option of. Only young people. And like the minority leader said, the recidivism rate is less than 1.1%, which is only for violations of probation, might I add, no violent acts. And that's because overwhelmingly, the ones who we think are scary are not getting out. They have to go back before the communities in which they did these heinous crimes. Those offices, those courthouses have data, have the records on what happened there. So do the state's attorney's offices who tried those cases. no one, I mean, I can't imagine the judge that's going to let a lot of the most heinous folks out if they are not absolutely rehabilitated, first and foremost. But I thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I will note, though, that what was not in that packet also were statements from the state's attorneys from Prince George's and Baltimore City, which do have the overwhelming majority of these cases, who are in support of this bill, along with our Attorney General. And I'll add that, surprisingly, both the Baltimore Sun and Washington Post apparently think we did what was right on this issue and are asking us to override this veto. No one would assume that they do not care for victims either. So I urge you to override the governor's veto and vote green on this bill. I thank you guys for your time and attention to this matter. Thank you very much.
We can't start without you. The question before the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the chief executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker. I got him.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Caroline to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to explain my vote, as I'm sitting here with my red vote up on the board, I'm just trying to reconcile something here over the last couple of days, how, 17-year-olds who are, their brains aren't completely developed, and they're committing the most heinous crimes imaginable to innocent people. But yet we debated a bill a couple days ago where 12, 13, 14-year-olds who have mental health disorders can somehow consent to their own medical treatment. I'm just trying to make that correlation. I'm trying to reconcile that in my mind, and I can't, so therefore I have to go red on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does anyone else want to explain their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will call the, excuse me. Gentlelady from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my vote, colleagues, I voted green on this bill for many reasons, but some of you were here yesterday, and I had my two nephews who were visiting me. One is 4 and one is 7, very tall for their ages and beautiful. And the people that we are talking about, mostly young men who are black, were children, are kids. And a lot of them that ended up doing a heinous act were already forgotten about before that act even occurred. I vote green on this bill because we are saying as a state, you are not forgotten. We do have second chances, and that we believe that you can change. That's why you vote green on this bill. We're a state that incarcerates more African American men than any state in the union. Just sit with that. And we're telling that these children have a chance for a change. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Hartford in the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to explain my vote for the reason that we really, because of the pandemic, people have been unable to really come and testify in person. One of the major victim advocacy groups that Russell Butler had, he's retired, and it's the Roper Victim Foundation Group. Mrs. Roper, Roberta Roper, would always come every session and would testify on bills that would help victims. And I think that because we really had no victim testimony, either written or in person, I think that some of these bills we've only heard one side of it. And I think to make good legislation, you need both sides. And I think that The governor understands that. I think he has great sympathy for victims. I mean, obviously, these children, they're dangerous children. And I think, we heard from Scott Schellenberger talking about some of the serious murders. So I know my colleague from Prince George's County, I understand where she's coming from. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to public safety, and that is a priority of our community, both black, white, Asian, and Indian. So with that, that's why I support the governor's veto. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. The clerk will call the roll. There being 88 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 494. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Senate Bill 178, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 178. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 178, Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, search warrants and inspection of records relating to police misconduct, Anton's Law.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? Again, a green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. Gentlelady from Montgomery.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I am so proud to be a Maryland legislator right now. I am thankful for your leadership, Madam Speaker, and thankful for the hard work of the Judiciary Committee and so many others in crafting this package of bills and holding officers accountable for their actions and to restore trust in policing. I thought about rising when we overrode the veto of HB 670, but decided to wait until today because these bills really are a package. They really go together. During that discussion, our colleague from the Eastern Shore explained why he wasn't voting for that bill, and he said that it wasn't the right solution. And that brought me back to 5 years ago, in 2016, after Freddie Gray was killed, when I and several members in this chamber worked on police accountability and reform. We looked at the shielding of accountability through the LEOBR, long before many of you even knew what that meant. And we looked at the Maryland Public Information Act, what we are addressing today in this veto override. At that time, long before Anton Black, we were looking at what the police did to Talita Dashiell and her lack of ability to get information about what happened in her case. And in the end, this body, with good intentions, I have no doubt, decided that the changes that we are making today were not the right solution. So this body did not address the MPIA and sort of tinkered around the edges of the LEOBR. And guess what? Nothing changed. Here we are today. Last year in my county, the wonderful Montgomery County that I am so honored to represent, a 5-year-old boy left school during the day. Some person in the school decided to call the police to bring him back. Police officers found him, and for 51 minutes, they berated this little black boy. They called him a beast. They got within inches of his face and screamed at him. They picked him up and shoved him in the police car. And when they strapped the belt over him, the seatbelt, he was so small that it covered his little face. They told him that they wished that his mother would let them beat him. They told his mother that she should beat him. So the LEOBR process was followed, and lo and behold, these officers are still there. Worse yet, they're still in a position where they could respond to a case like that. And under the MPIA right now, we cannot find out anything about whether any discipline was imposed on these law enforcement officials. And because of this bill, which I will be voting to override the governor's veto, from now on, we will be able to find out. So in honor of that little boy, Madam Speaker, I will be voting green on this bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from Montgomery in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, as many of you know, Anton's Law's legislation that the good senator from Baltimore City and I have been working with Anton Black's family on for a number of sessions now. And what Anton's Law, in essence, addresses is the inadequacy in Maryland state law as it relates to how police operate in our communities. Anton Black should have been alive today. And he's not, because a former corrupt police chief decided to withhold important and pertinent information about an officer's record, particularly his multiple use of force reports and complaints while an officer in Dover, Delaware. He was given a heavy severance package after being indicted on assault charges in Delaware for footage that showed him kicking an unarmed black man unconscious. And instead of him being decertified, he crossed state lines, moved to Greensboro, and was hired by a former police chief that knew him from his time in Delaware. Despite many members in the community expressing concern about Webster's background and that someone of color would end up dead. Those concerns were ignored. Webster was hired, and not too long after that, he and a few other off-duty police officers were chasing down, essentially hogtied, tasered, and applied force and pressure on a young boy's frame, his body, right in front of his parents' home. His mother, still traumatized from seeing her own son lose consciousness right before her eyes. His father, still wondering why there has been no justice in the case of his son. All because of inadequacy in Maryland state law that we could have addressed decades ago when black and brown communities have been bringing to the legislature the concerns about the way police operate in our communities. We cannot pretend that police violence does not exist. And it is also not new to American public discourse. This bill, Anton's Law, not only recognizes the humanity of a young man who still should be alive today for his daughter, continuing his education and supporting his family and himself, but this represents the work of advocates and people who have been coming time and again and sharing their trauma with each and every one of us. This bill says Black Lives Matter. This bill says that Anton Black's life mattered and that we can and should do better as a state. I am ashamed and disgusted that the governor vetoed a bill named after Anton Black that his family and community supports. When Anton Black was killed, he said publicly that his family deserved answers and accountability. That is what this bill accomplishes. So it is hypocritical to then veto a bill that the family community advocates have been calling for, that gets to the heart of what we're talking about when we talk about accountability, and that is transparency. Our constituents can hold us accountable because they know what we're doing on their behalf. The same has to be true for law enforcement. If we do not have transparency, there can be no accountability, there can be no justice, and there can be no community trust. That is what this bill says. And Governor Hogan's veto of it sends a clear message on where he stands on police transparency and accountability. Strong words for Freddie Gray and Baltimore City, but never strong words for the abusive and corrupt cops who are responsible not just for Anton Black's death, but so many other black and brown people who are not here today in our state. And I talk about Anton Black a lot, but there are several other names of people who should still be here today who are not. And Madam Speaker, besides Anton Black, I'll name a few. Freddie Gray, Corin Gaines, Tyrone West, William Green, Emmanuel Oates, Leonard Shand, Robert White, Robert Johnson, Glenn Tyndall, Billy Rucker, Eric Garrison, Reno Owens, Curtis Deal, Terrence Thomas, LeVar Douglas, Dayton Harper, Matthew Wood, Kimani Johnson, Josiah Colson, Rashad Ofer, May Hall, Jorgen Sidney, Christopher Brown, Corey Joyner, Ryan Dietrich, Keston Lewis, Tanya Buggs, Brittany McDuff, Mark Blucker, Maurice Johnson, Devontae Bowman, Ronald Royal, Kareem Ali, Rudolph Bell, James Coleman, Bernard Lufton, Sean Gamby, Larry Hooker, Alan Harvey, Yakuna McDonald, Robert Jones, Perry Webb, Dante Bennett, Cottrell Newsom, Chester Cresswell, Anthony Anderson, Shawongwe Ange, Patrick Fisher Jr., Muhammad Akeem. These are all Maryland names of people who died at the hands of law enforcement in Maryland. This is the reality of who we're talking about when we say that we are opposed to police transparency and accountability. You are telling communities that their loved ones, their advocacy, their lives do not matter. We have a fiduciary responsibility as legislators to do right by all of our constituents. And that is what Anton's law would do. He is one of many victims, and I'm glad to cast my vote green to override Governor Hogan's misguided veto. Shame on him, and thank you for the legislature for doing this.
Minority Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that impassioned speech from the annex. When 19-year-old Anton Black was tragically killed in 2019, Governor Hogan was among the very first to call for full transparency and answers for his family. So I would respectfully disagree with my colleague in the annex that Governor Hogan had any malice or bad feelings towards Anton and this bill named after him. However, the process outlined in this bill places the lives of officers as well as innocent people unnecessarily at risk. Limitations such as the requirement to serve no-knock warrants between the hours of 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. are patently ridiculous. Voiding the warrant after 10 days and requiring a 20-second delay before entering a residence while serving that warrant between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. needlessly endangers police officers, occupants, and bystanders. The provisions of this bill that impact the release of investigatory and personnel records are equally disturbing. Officers who are exonerated will stand to be subject to having their records exposed. In this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. And I would like to know how every one of you would feel if the legislative complaints against us were made public. And maybe that's a bill for next year so that the public can PIA the complaints against each and every one of us, even if we are found innocent. As amended, these provisions place the officer's safety at risk, erode officers' relationships with the residents of our most vulnerable communities, and deter witnesses participating in the prosecution of violent crimes. Once again, this goes too far. It just goes too far. And with that, I will be supporting the governor's veto of this bill.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After the last speaker said passionate reading off those names, I thought about reading off the names of the victims of the 1,652 people that have been murdered in Baltimore City over the last 5 years. But on a Saturday afternoon, I don't think I want to put the body through that. This bill does not make our citizens more safe. It doesn't. I'll be gladly supporting the governor's veto of this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone like to change their vote? Not, the clerk will take the call. There being 91 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 178. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. There being 132 members present, the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading Senate bills number 66. The clerk will call the bills that are remaining on the list.
Senate Bill 415, Public Financing Act Matching Fund Revisions, Maryland Fair Elections Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 415, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 497, Juvenile Services Education Board and Program Establishment Powers and Duties.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 125 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 497, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 525, Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and State Board of Elections Centralized Booking Facility Ballot Drop Box.
Is on third reading and
Madam Speaker.
final passage. Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you. I just had a quick question about this bill. I guess for a floor leader, please.
Committee Chair.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. So this bill would put ballot boxes in the prison in Baltimore City?
It would put a ballot drop box in local detention centers, including in the Baltimore City Detention Center, that have capacities of more than 50 people, because people, especially in local detention centers, are still eligible to vote even though that they're incarcerated.
Okay, so can they get an absentee ballot already or no?
They can get an absentee ballot, yes.
So they can get an absentee ballot now, and mail it in, but this bill just makes it a little easier.
It would enable them to be able to use a drop box to drop off the ballot while incarcerated.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm just going to speak on the bill. I'm against the bill for many of reasons, but I understand people who may support it. But the most, I guess, egregious reason for the reason I'm mostly against this bill is the fact that I put in a bill that would have helped senior citizens that the delegation that I represent supported, got out unanimously, and that bill, as far as I know, is going nowhere. So this bill will actually put people incarcerated, it'll make it easier for people incarcerated to vote when they already have that right, but the bill that I had to help seniors is going nowhere. So I don't think the body should support the intent that support the idea that this body wants prisoners to have more rights than our seniors. So I'm absolutely voting no. Thank you.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 92 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 525, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 551, Work Group on School Construction Incentives.
Madam Speaker?
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have been waiting on amendment that has not come up, so I'd like to special order this until Monday for session.
Try
Later today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll just get back to it. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill will be brought up whenever the amendment comes. Okay, thank you. Calendar, third reading, Senate Bills number 53. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 95, Public Utilities, Investor-Owned Utilities, Prevailing Wage.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 92 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 42, Senate Bill 95 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 318, Natural Resources, Fishing and Hunting Rights.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded the vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 107 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 318, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 392, Electricity and Gas Limited Income Mechanisms and Assistance.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 392, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 501, Towing or Removal of Vehicles from Parking Lots, Placement of Signs, Regional Malls.
Is on third
Madam
reading
Speaker.
and final passage. Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Would the floor leader rise for a quick question on this bill?
Floor leader.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Excellent. Can you tell me what this bill does? I haven't seen it before, and there's no cross file.
Sure. What this bill does is it requires signage with specific towing information to be placed at every entrance to the parking lot of a regional mall, and it defines what that is.
What's the regional mall? Like,
You want the definition?
just a specific size?
Shopping mall with at least 400,000 square feet of gross leasable area and 2 anchor stores, i.e. large department stores.
Any square footage requirement?
I beg your pardon?
Any square footage minimum requirement? Square footage minimum requirement?
I just said 400,000 square feet of gross leasable area and 2 anchor stores.
Okay. Would it be possible to special order this for a First Amendment?
No.
Well, who answered? I was asking you. I don't know. Why would somebody else answer? I'm not asking you. I'm just saying. Madam Speaker, why would somebody else answer the question on what I'm talking to the floor leader?
I'm right here, and I answered your question. We've actually had this bill on the calendar for many, many, many days. So we've been aware that this has been coming up. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I understand. I'd just like to put some amendments on it if I can. Okay, thank you.
Chair of the committee? Okay. Is there any further debate? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 111 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 501, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 681, Motor Vehicles Inspection Certificates, exception.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 681, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 691, Real Property Landlord and Tenant Reusable Tenant Screening Reports.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 118 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 691, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 811, Unemployment Insurance, Computation of Earned Rate of Contribution, Applicable Table of Rates.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 811, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Message from the Senate. House Bill 289. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 289, Peace Orders, Workplace Violence.
The clerk will read the message from the Senate.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate does not proceed in the Senate amendments and agrees to a conference committee to confer the disagreeing votes of the two houses. The House has appointed Delegate Atterbury Chair, Delegate Shetty, and Delegate Williams. The Senate appoints Senator Sidnor Chair, Senator Hedelman, and Senator Carter. Said bill is returned to your whip.
Calendar of third reading, Senate Bills number 67. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 427, Public Schools, Provision of Menstrual Hygiene Products Requirement.
It is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 102 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 427, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 627, Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, Repeal and Procedures for Discipline.
The gentleman from Anne Arundel in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk.
You can read the number, please.
The amendment number is SB 027893.
Amendment number 1.
What this amendment does is this bill provides for a spouse to receive notice if there's going to be action taken against the pension, against a law enforcement officer and other individuals, and it could affect their pension. The bill, this bill was amended, provides notice, but I am concerned that the notice may not be sufficient because under the Maryland rules, notice would be under Maryland Rule 1321, leaving it at the dwelling house with someone of suitable age and discretion who is residing there, which means it doesn't mean it would necessarily go to a spouse or the other appropriate family member. Therefore, the amendment proposes a definition for notice and requiring that the notice be by way of direct personal service. I press the amendment.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I've seen the amendment. I've spoken to the delegate from Anne Arundel County, and the committee would accept this as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank
All
you,
in
Mr. Chair.
favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Recognizing the gentlelady from Montgomery in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My amendment, I have an amendment at the desk. It is number 783-123/1.
Amendment number 1.
And is the amendment up? Madam Speaker, my amendment is quite similar to the delegate from Anne Arundel County. As many of you know, I practice family law. And in my practice, pension division is a very difficult and complicated area. In most cases, particularly in cases where the one or the other party, or both, are public servants, law enforcement or otherwise, it is in all likelihood the largest asset in the marital estate. My amendment does the following. It provides that with the notice, there also has to be served a copy of the complaint. And along with that, there should be instructions to obtain independent counsel. Again, we are now putting, if the parties are in an intact marriage, at a place where they're in conflict, or there is a conflict of interest. And it also specifies that the service will be done by the Attorney General or the state's attorney who is prosecuting the case by direct personal service, the term used in the last amendment that was accepted. My amendment goes a little farther to indicate that direct personal service may not be accomplished by leaving the notice and the complaint at the office or home of an individual described in the paragraph, which is the spouse, former spouse, the officer, or any other beneficiary. And that you can't just leave it with an individual of suitable age and discretion residing at the home other than those individuals listed in the paragraph of Section 2. The rule regarding service allows service to be accomplished by leaving it at the home with someone of suitable age. This type of a complaint is too important to simply leave at the home and not make sure that the person whose rights to the pension may be affected doesn't receive actual direct personal service. I think it is a strong amendment. I think it complements the amendment that was already accepted, and I move the amendment.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The committee believes that we've addressed this issue. We've addressed it well, that existing law is enough to address the issue that's been raised by the delegate for Montgomery County, and would ask the body to resist the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm not going to press it because I don't want to put everyone in a bad spot. We've all been in that spot a lot this term. However, I honestly believe that we need to be sure the service is correct, and it should in fact indicate who does the service, because it's silent. It doesn't say the AG, it doesn't say the state's attorney. So with all due respect, I'm sorry that the amendment's not accepted. It truly would make it a better bill. Thank you.
She gone out. Sean, how am I going to get her? She left. Is the gentlelady pressing her amendment or withdrawing her amendment? Gentlelady from Montgomery, who was in the annex.
I will press it so that someone else can discuss why it's also important.
The gentleman from Anne Arundel on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me. And I appreciate my chair accepting my amendment as friendly. However, my fellow delegate from Montgomery County, who has practiced family law, I believe, longer than I, raises some very good points. These pension rights are critical. A bad actor in law enforcement may have committed a bad act against the public, but he may be, or she may be committing the same bad acts in their home. And unfortunately, I, in my career as a domestic attorney, have seen people who are more than willing to shortchange their spouse or their family from a pension benefit in spite. Therefore, we need to have very confident measures put in place, and I believe this amendment does so, to make sure that that spouse or family member knows of this action and to make sure they don't lose a marital property right. Therefore, I support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Family Law Caucus, evidently. It's a pretty common notification. You wouldn't want to have to talk to a person in your jurisdiction who got surprised that they had there was a benefit would remove from them. So I'm going to support them today.
Committee Chair.
I would ask the body to resist the amendment.
On the amendment, gentlelady from Hartford in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to, I hate to say I don't agree with my chair, but I don't. I agree with my colleague from Montgomery and my colleague from Anne Arundel. Qualified domestic relations orders, anything dealing with pensions or retirement, people lie, cheat, and steal. They try to avoid the discovery where they have to say that they've got a pension. It's probably the most litigated thing outside of children, or they might be 50-50. So I think that what they've agreed to makes wonderful sense. If I've just seen where if somebody doesn't really understand a complicated issue and the legislation's drafted, it's drafted wrong. And we have two experts that really know how critical this is, and they both say that this is a very important. And we're talking about marital property, and we're talking about vested interests, and this is very, very important. So I would just say I would ask my chair to reconsider it, because I think that the Montgomery amendment is a friendly amendment to this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The maker of the motion, once they wipe down the box.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the discussion was helpful. I am not going to put the body through another roll call or any other such thing. I will withdraw the amendment, but I guarantee I will make someone in the Senate aware and see if I can get the language, proper, strong language put on there. Thank you.
Okay. The amendment has been withdrawn. Any other amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 627, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 632, election law, contested elections.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 632, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 669, constitutional amendment, civil jury trials.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will take the call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 100 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 669, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed.
One more, Madam.
Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 670, courts, civil jury trials, amount in controversy.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 99 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 670, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, Senate Bills number 54. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 133, local tax relief for working families, Act of 2021.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 133, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 310, election law, campaign finance entities, termination.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 310, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 459, Economic Development Comprehensive Technical Assistance Program, establishment.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 459, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 639, Maryland Technology Development Corporation Inclusion Fund Establishment.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 126 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 639, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 659, Historic Revitalization Tax Credit, Small Commercial Projects, Alterations.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 659, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 716, Solid Waste Management, Prohibition on Releasing a Balloon into the Atmosphere.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 199 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 716, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 887, Property Tax Credit, Business Entities, State of Emergency.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 887, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, Senate Bills number 59. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 119, Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 95 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 119, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 278, State Department of Education and Maryland Department of Health, Maryland School-Based Health Center Standards, Telehealth.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We may have an amendment at the desk.
One moment, please. Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had so many amendments drawn up for today that I've lost track of them. I apologize. I know, aren't you all excited? Here it is, okay. I have an amendment at the desk, 713429.
Amendment number 1.
So much to be considered, the reading of the amendment, Madam
So
Speaker.
order.
Thank you. This amendment is pretty simple. It just prevents this program from being used to have telehealth abortions. We spoke about this earlier when there was a House filing of it when my colleague from Carroll County presented this amendment. And it is in the same vein as it was then. Women who are going through such an event should see their doctors. They shouldn't be doing this through telehealth. They should have their blood pressure checked, and they should have contact with someone who has had physical eyes on them. Many people shared their experiences during the previous debate, and that all still speaks to the big issues that surround telehealth and prescribing abortion medications. I would press my amendment, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, Delegate. I'm not sure that you're thinking about the amendment relative to the school-based health center telehealth. I think there is a portion of this amendment that addresses the use of medical abortions, but I guess I would ask the body to resist this amendment. It's exactly the same amendment that we considered in the House, on the House side, and was defeated 39 to 93. Let me remind you why we defeated this amendment in the past, and I would need to remind folks that the folks who work in school-based health centers are licensed healthcare providers and have to follow all the standards of care and all of the rules and all the processes as all licensed healthcare providers in the state of Maryland. And last session, we enacted legislation that creates standard requirements for all healthcare practitioners under their licensure requirements. And this bill, what we're doing is making it consistent across the state. In fact, Medicaid 2 years ago removed its requirements for practitioners for pre-approved or to be pre-approved to provide telehealth. So Medicaid did this because the application process, the application to do telehealth, really didn't add anything and negatively impacted access to care. And that's what we saw in the pandemic with school-based health centers. I'm going to remind you, these are the centers that provide primary care, behavioral health, and oral health care to students who are primarily affected by poverty. What our experience was during the pandemic when schools were closed, the access to that health care was shut down for those students. And when school-based health centers administrators tried to go through the process to become eligible to deliver this service, they ran into all kinds of barriers. So for example, Montgomery County, 13 school-based health centers in Montgomery County applied for to be able to do telehealth in November. They were not approved until February. So it took them 3 months to get approved. 2 school-based health centers in Wicomico. Let's think about Wicomico, a little more rural, and so we really need access, right? They asked for an application process to be waived. They were turned down. 4 school-based health centers in Prince George's and 13 in Baltimore County have not been able to move forward on their application process yet. So this amendment, most of this amendment, basically keeps that same non-functional process in place. So that's why I ask you to resist this amendment. The part of the amendment that addresses the medical piece, the direct medical piece, I would suggest that, first of all, the bill is about telehealth and being able to provide it. And we don't typically prescribe what healthcare providers can do. And they cannot do all numbers of things. Remember, this is primary care. That's what is being delivered in school-based health centers. So they're not doing appendectomies, they're not doing tonsillectomies, they're not diagnosing cancer. They're simply providing primary care. So I would ask the body to resist this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my good friend from Montgomery County. And I also just want to commend her on her excitement about reopening schools. I share the same excitement, and I hope that we're able to reopen them and get our kids back in them full-time ASAP. I think that we may just have a difference of opinion that we aren't going to work out on the floor today, and that's totally fine, and I would still press my amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Senate Bill 278 having received a, no. Call the roll. On Senate Bill 278, clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 117 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 278, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 546, School Buildings, Drinking Water Outlets, Elevated Level of Lead Safe School Drinking Water Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 129 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 546, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 697, State Procurement Minority Business Enterprise Program, Participation by Gender or Race.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 131 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 697, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 777, Public Health Maryland Prenatal and Infant Care Grant Program Fund.
Is on third reading and final passage. Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the floor leader rise, please?
Floor leader.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So much of what we do here is for the record, so that should there be a question about a bill, legislative intent can be firmly established.
Right.
So this bill, Maryland's Prenatal and Infant Care Grant Program Fund, would this fund abortion?
The bill is about expanding access to quality prenatal and infant care for low-income women.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. Yes, indeed. I actually got an Attorney General's opinion on this, so I want the body to know and it to be reflected for the historic record that this bill is a great bill that provides funding for prenatal and infant care. It will not ever in any way fund abortion funding. It has a fee-for-service system, and it does not fit into this bill. So thank you so much, Floor Leader, and I will be voting for this great bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from Western Maryland in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have an amendment at the desk. It's 453-420/1.
Amendment number 1.
So in order to verify the fact that this bill could never fund abortions, that's basically what this amendment would do. It basically says that the Secretary may not award a grant under this section to a federally qualified health center, hospital, or provider of prenatal care that does provide abortion services. And I do admit that the state does some really good work in this area. If you go out to the Maryland Department of Health website, just last year they awarded 27 grants to different organizations to assist in this area. You had grants going to such places as the Mary Center in Prince George's County, $170,000 for Latina mothers in Montgomery and Prince George's counties for prenatal and pediatric services and healthcare autonomy. You had $150,000 going to the Family Tree in Baltimore City for home visitation programs for at-risk mothers designed to support new mothers in caring for their newborns. Also in Baltimore City, you had $250,000 going to Be More for Healthy Babies initiative, which investigators use cutting-edge strategies to direct vulnerable pregnant women and newborns into appropriate obstetric, and pediatric homes. So what this bill potentially does is expand those services to our residents, which I do think is a good thing, but what the amendment also does is clarify that no money could ever go towards abortion services, and I asked to move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the gentleman for his explanation of his amendment. I would ask the body to vote against the amendment. You all just heard the dialogue between myself and the minority whip. In addition to that, and I'll quote from the bill, the delegate's amendment would limit access to low-income mothers who wish to, quote, maintain a healthy pregnancy. That's what the bill is about, and I would ask you to resist the amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the floor leader rise for just a brief question?
Sir.
Thank you, Delegate. Good to see you, sir. Does this bill, without the amendment that's proposed, provide funding to entities that provide prenatal care and abortion services?
The bill provides grants to federally qualified health centers, hospitals, and authorized providers of prenatal care.
And that would include Planned Parenthood, which performs abortions, but also provides prenatal care, correct?
If the organization is a federally qualified health center, a hospital, or is authorized to provide prenatal care.
Right. And there's nothing in the bill that would prevent the commingling of those funds in any of those organizations, correct?
The bill specifies that the funds can only be used for prenatal care and maintaining a healthy pregnancy. Only.
Correct, but there's nothing that actually requires, forbids the commingling. That was the question.
And the answer is that the funds can only be used for the purposes specified in the bill.
Thank you. So on the amendment, I would support the amendment. And the reason for that is because it's pretty straightforward. Since the intent of my good friend in the statement and my other colleague, my good colleague friend, is that abortion services would, quote, never be used. This simply makes sure that that is the case because, as we know, federally qualified clinics such as Planned Parenthood perform prenatal services. They are federally qualified. They also have a primary purpose of providing abortion. So for that purpose, I would support the amendment.
On the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Maker of the motion.
Thank you. I do think it's important to remove any gray area in this bill and keep it true to its title, the Maryland Prenatal and Infant Care Program. As written, Planned Parenthood would be eligible to receive funds. I read from the list earlier from the Maryland Department of Health. One other grant that they awarded was $225,000 to Planned Parenthood, seeking to reduce infant mortality rates by increasing access to comprehensive women's health services for contraception, preventing substance-exposed pregnancies, and providing education on health insurance. There's a belief that Planned Parenthood wouldn't have qualified because they didn't provide prenatal services in Maryland, but this shows that they do provide both prenatal services as well as abortion services. As a matter of fact, the majority of their services that they provide are for abortions. For every 41 abortions, they provide only one prenatal service. And for every 133 abortions, they provide only one adoption referral. So I think we all know how money can be supplanted. If Planned Parenthood has provided money for prenatal services in Maryland, they could free up other monies to use for abortion services. I think this amendment clarifies that they would not be able to do that. I totally encourage the use of tax dollars for prenatal and infant care. I think it's the right way to go, but I personally do not support use of taxpayer funding for abortions. And for that purpose, I press the amendment.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am very pleased to hear the clarification, finally, of what the amendment does. It doesn't say money can't be used for abortions, because we all know that the bill can't use money for abortions the way it's written. What the amendment says, if a provider of prenatal care provides abortions separately funded, separately from this program, then they are not eligible for prenatal funding for their prenatal patients to take care of these pregnant women. And this is where many pregnant women get their health care, be it federally qualified clinics or Planned Parenthood. These are appropriate places. This money will not be used for abortions, but this amendment is not about that. This amendment is about defunding those facilities that many of our poorest people need to get basic health care. So for that reason, I thank the people who participated in the discussion for getting to the bottom of what this amendment does instead of the original statement, which was very misleading. And I urge you strongly to support this so that all women get the health care they need when they're pregnant.
Madam Speaker.
I need to say reject the amendment. Excuse me if I said it backwards. Please reject this amendment.
Okay. Maker of the motion.
I think I was clear when I started speaking what the amendment did, and I was not misleading anyone, including the chairwoman there of HDO. There are many fine organizations in this state that provide services to women to get the help that they need without also providing abortion services. I read from many of them. I could read the entire list, but I know that we all want to get out of here at some point in time this evening. So again, with that said, I press the amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change your vote? If not, clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the floor leader just answer a couple questions for me so I can make sure that I understand this?
Floor leader.
Thank you, sir. These qualified health care providers, they are paid fee for service, correct?
I don't know the answer to that.
Maybe the chair knows?
I didn't understand the question.
So when we give them money, we give them a certain amount of money for each service.
We give who money?
Sorry?
Who are we giving the money to?
To these healthcare providers.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fee for service. Is that how it works?
I assume. I don't honestly know.
Okay, I'm fairly certain that's the way that it works, and in that case, I don't have a concern that these funds will be misused in a manner in which you do not intend them to be.
The money can't be used. It would be illegal if it were used in a fashion that had anything to do with providing an abortion. This is about keeping women and babies healthy.
Thank you. That's my reading of the bill as well, and I'll just tell the body, if we were to try to defund every single healthcare provider that ever offered somebody an abortion or tried to provide them with one or a consult with them, we would have to defund Johns Hopkins, the University of Maryland, every hospital in our state that takes care of people, and every OBGYN. So I will be green on this because I do want to support the women in our state who have chosen life for their children. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senate Bill 777 is on third reading and final passage. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 111 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 777, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 830, Secretary of Health, School-Based Health Centers, Guidelines and Administration of Grants.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 830, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 958, Non-Public Special Education Schools State Contribution Increase.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 958, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Report of the Committee on Judiciary, report number 60. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 899, Courts, Civil Jury Trials, Amount and Controversy, Favorable Amendments, Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment lowers the amount in the bill from $30,000 as the threshold to $25,000. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 902, Constitutional Amendment, Civil Jury Trials, Favorable Amendments, Amendment number 1.
Recognizing committee chair.
Move so much be the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
The amendments lower the threshold in the bill from $30,000 to $25,000. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Rules and Executive Nominations, report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Joint Resolution 1, Natural Resources, Fishing, Wild-Caught Blue Catfish, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Joint Resolution 4, Natural Resources, Fishing, Wild-Caught Blue Catfish, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Report of the Committee on Rules and Executive Nominations, report number 8. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 946, Historic St. Mary's City Fort to 400 Commission, favorable amendments, Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the Chair of Rules.
Thank you very much. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 alters the makeup of the commission to conform to the House version, which has already passed. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Conference Committee report. House Bill 12, the clerk will read the bill and the Conference Committee report.
House Bill 12, alcoholic beverages, sale or delivery for off-premises consumption, amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Move the Conference Committee report, Madam Speaker. The amendment is just clarifying.
The motion before the House is to adopt the Conference Committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Conference Committee report is adopted. House Bill 12 is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the floor leader just please let us know who is going to be able to continue doing this valuable service?
That will be determined by the local liquor boards. In order to be able to continue doing it for up to the next 2 years, each local liquor board in the jurisdiction would have to give their approval, and in the process of, they don't have to do any findings, but in the process of making that decision, the amendment from the Senate would clarify that they would need to take into consideration public health as well as the economic benefit.
And the liquor license class that will be able to sell or deliver off premises are restaurants, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and bars?
Serving food? They have to be serving food.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification.
Sure.
Is there any further debate? Hearing none, House Bill 12 is on third reading and final passage. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 130 votes in the affirmative, Senate House Bill 12 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Special order calendar.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 551, Work Group on School Construction Incentives.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It's 713920/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Amendment just clarifies that the Stadium Authority may cover the administrative costs of the, in fiscal year 2021 and 2022 of Build to Learn Act. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is to move the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the, no, that's not what it is. No, now we're on third reading. Senate Bill 551 is on third reading and final passage. Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change your vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 132 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 551, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. she right here? Yeah. Okay. Special order calendar, Senate Bill 736. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 736, Health Occupations Pharmacist Administration of Children's Vaccines Study and Temporary Authority, Amendment number 1.
Okay. The maker of the motion is the gentleman from Cecil and the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In terms of the amendment, do you need me to read the amendment number again?
No.
Okay.
No. Just explain. Yeah. Just explain the amendment.
Okay. On the amendment, made comments earlier today. I do support the idea of the bill. I think that this is also an important issue, and as we had spoken about earlier today, in keeping of the rules of this body, I'd like to press the amendment that would make it unlawful for the state to take away any liberties or pursuit of those liberties if someone was not to have a vaccine passport. And with that, I'd like to move the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can you guys hear me? Okay, sorry. I came over from the annex to talk to you guys so I could talk to everybody at the same time. I'm going to urge the body to reject this amendment. Let me just step back and tell you what this bill does and why it's so important. This bill is about childhood vaccinations. We are actually in a really serious situation right now in the state of Maryland and throughout the country in terms of our childhood vaccination rates as a result of the COVID crisis. Maryland has performed for the last several decades as one of the best, most highly vaccinated states in the country. However, when COVID hit, our childhood vaccination rates plummeted. We were the highest ranking state in the nation. We had the largest drop from April 2019 to April 2020 in terms of childhood vaccinations. People were not able to go to their well child visits. Our county health departments that run clinics before school starts weren't running those clinics or limited those clinics. So what ended up happening is our kids did not get their vaccinations for some pretty scary stuff like measles, like whooping cough. And what we need to do is make sure that we are catching up in that vaccination rate. It's incredibly important that we spend the next couple of years having our policy, which has been working for decades in the state of Maryland, of having the state law that requires childhood vaccinations for entry into school and entry into child care programs, working in partnership with local health departments, making sure that we're working together with the pediatricians to make sure our kids have access to the vaccines that will save their lives. What this amendment does is it says that actually the state can no longer require those vaccines and the boards of education and the counties can no longer do so either. It really undermines the very important intent of this bill, and I would very much urge the body to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We didn't spend enough time talking about the impact of the COVID lockdowns and how they impacted people. When I went home after session last year, I actually spent money putting out a poll, and I asked people, just tell me how COVID was impacting you. And I got a lot of responses from people in my district. I'd like to read a couple of them. Peggy said, some of my sister-in-law's visits, her medical visits, were canceled, which was affecting her doctor's ability to assess her pain and prescribe accordingly. Hearing her scream and moan throughout the night is horrible. My aunt also can't get an appointment with her neurologist and is in excruciating pain. My personal appointments for shots in my hand for arthritis have been canceled, but who needs to do frivolous things like open jars, hold things, or dress yourself? And I think the regulations that were put forward really did hurt a lot of people. If you remember, we had rallies right out here on State Circle. People were labeled non-essential and they were forced out of their jobs through no fault or control over their own. We had a lot of people, including some folks here in the General Assembly, really come down pretty hard on those folks. I think the word that was used was reckless. And they were disparaged. They were really attacked for just wanting to go to work. And then a few weeks later, the criminal justice issues that were discussed throughout the country started to come to the forefront of the discussion. And this was about the time the Black Lives Matter rallies were happening. And the people that attacked the Reopen Maryland folks were then, they treated those folks and their protests very differently. We started getting people attacking folks in District 6 for going to church. I'd invite any person to come to a supermarket in eastern Baltimore County. You can't find enough space to acknowledge the state's regulations for social distancing. And in churches, we had people sitting 25 feet apart from each other. So I don't think what happened was fair, and I think this amendment speaks to that. We have people in the national discourse who are really calling for freedoms to be tied to vaccination status. And I'm really concerned about this, and I'm really concerned about where this could go. So seeing how the COVID controls have so unfairly hurt people, I think the idea of saying we don't want a vaccine passport, we want to protect people's rights is a great idea, and I support the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would again remind the body that what this amendment does is prevent the state from requiring vaccines for children going into schools. And I would remind the body that all 50 states have laws on the books that require vaccines for children entering into schools, and I would urge the body to reject the amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Senate Bill 736 is on third reading and final passage. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 116 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 736, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Senate Bill 888 is on special.
Madam Speaker, that was my
Maker
fault.
of the motion is the gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank the committee chair for indulging me. I've read it, and I have all my questions answered.
Okay. Hearing that, the bill is ordered passed to third reading.
Is that in parking lot or no?
Special order calendar, House Bill 1173. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1173, Calvert County Public Facilities Bond.
The
Madam
House
Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Baltimore City.
Madam Speaker, thank you for your indulgence. A few days ago, I wasn't going to stand up on this, but I was moved to stand up because I was concerned about who was going to pay for this in the midst of a pandemic. We're talking about various capital needs that to the tune of $20 million need to be funded. And I just thought to myself, do the good taxpayers of Calvert County, do they want to see their expenditures on debt service go up $1.5 million annually? It vexed my spirit. I just didn't know what to do with myself. So I thought to myself, I might be a Baltimore City delegate, but I'm here for all Marylanders, seriously. So I dug into this a little deeper, and I saw that there needed to be some improvements to the Dunkirk Park. We needed to revitalize the salt barn and do a couple other very important things in Calvert County to the tune of $20 million. And I said, you know what? We do capital improvements in Baltimore City. It's a very important set of activities. So with that and my deep and abiding appreciation for local courtesy, I'm going to say I feel all my answers have been found, and I do hope the good taxpayers of Calvert County include spending more money to improve their capital investments. Thank you all.
Gentleman from St. Mary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just want to maybe clarify some of the things with this bond bill here. It's not a bond bill, it's bond authority, paid for only by the county residents. A little bit different than the normal bond bills that we'll see flying through the General Assembly during this time during the session. So this is 100% paid by the county, and it's bond authority. And it's not incurred unless it's enacted upon by the county commissioners as enabling legislation, deserving local courtesy, which seems to be an awful, awful big deal here in the General Assembly this session. And I'm just wondering why.
I appreciate the education, good delegate, that you're attempting to provide me. I do know the difference between a bond bill and a bond authority. And in fact, the jurisdiction I represent does not have to come here to get permission for bond authority because we're not one of the 5 jurisdictions that have a commission form of government. In fact, in my day job, I do manage the capital budget and oversee the staff that produces the capital budget for the city of Baltimore. So thank you for your attempts, but I don't need it. Thank you.
Gentleman from Caroline.
Madam Speaker, move the previous question.
No.
You know, shame on you for moving the previous question.
The
Seriously.
question for the body is to move the previous question. All in favor
Madam
signify by saying aye.
No.
Opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 1173 is on third reading and final passage. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker. Not going to get off that easy, that's right.
The gentleman from Calvert to explain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it. So during this session, we have seen the issue of local privilege shredded. And we've seen it with House Bill 655, and we've seen it with many other bills. And we've in particular seen the Calvert County bills shredded in particular. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that some in this body don't like the debate and don't like free speech. I'm convinced of that. And so therefore, they attack the 95,000 citizens of Calvert County because they have engaged in cancel culture because they can't deal with hearing any kind of diversity of thought. So I will go home
Point
to my
of order,
citizens
Madam
of Calvert
Speaker.
County.
Recognizing majority leader.
Just explaining my
Gentleman
vote.
is again questioning the intent of members of the chamber in violation of the rules of the House.
Madam Speaker, the bill was special ordered, and it's a local privilege bill, so the gentleman actually is engaging in violating the rules by having the bill.
You're voting
So-
for the bill.
Absolutely.
As soon as you sit down, I'm going to call the number. And the
Understood.
bill's going to pass.
Understood. And so for all those reasons, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the fact that this body has decided that the rules don't matter and local privilege doesn't matter. Now that we know that, we will debate accordingly. Thank you.
I disagree with the last statement you made. Clerk will take the call. There being 118 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1173, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Message from the Senate. Senate bills introduced in the House. The clerk will read the bills and committee assignments.
Senate Bill 154, Senator Hedelman. House Rules by Order Sylvia Siegert. Chief Clerk.
Will the committee chairs come forward, please? That ends the work at the desk. We are coming in, I knew it got quiet then. We're coming in Monday at 1 p.m. I am calling on the committee chairs to make their announcements. Judiciary?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House Judiciary Committee will be voting at 11 a.m. on Monday. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have not planned that far in advance at this moment. So please watch your texts and your emails in case we need to have a voting session before session. It is possible, but I don't know. So just keep your eyes open. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment and Transportation Committee will vote on one bill and one concurrence at 6 p.m. tonight.
In 3 minutes? Okay. Ways and Means?
Yes, in 3 minutes.
Ways and Means?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That committee will be voting at noon on Monday on 4 bills and a handful of concurrences, and I believe the Early Childhood Subcommittee will have to meet 15 minutes beforehand. Thank you.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Economic Matters Committee will be voting at noon on Monday.
Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Appropriations Committee will be voting at 12:30 p.m. on Monday.
Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader, excuse me.
I have an announcement, Madam Speaker.
And subcommittee announcement?
No, ma'am. This is the Sears Circle Caucus.
Oh, jeez. Oh, no. Last day of session thing with you? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is to remind everyone that the Sears Circle Caucus will be having its meeting on Sine Die. And I am afraid, Madam Speaker, that although not mentioned in rule number 83 of page 53 of the rule book, appropriate attire is required on Sine Die. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the Sears Circle Caucus is requiring those to wear the appropriate attire on Sine Die. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick reminder to everyone who's been assigned to the numerous conference committees that have appointed today to be on top of getting your work done, because we're not coming in until 1 p.m., but to get things resolved as early as possible. So please keep on top of that, conference committee members.
Anything else? Anything else? Okay. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There being 133 members present, the House is still in session, recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand adjourned until Monday, April 12th at 1 p.m., Legislative Day, March 27th.